morning, everyone. All right, let's get started. Now as much fun as they do. Woo! Mark, can you open up in a word of prayer?
Yes. Our Father, thank you for allowing us to come together again and to study your word. We're thankful that we have your word in which to study. We ask that you would help us to understand your word better and apply it to our lives so that we can become better disciples of your Son. We thank you for the health that we have to get together here this morning. We ask that you would be with those that are struggling with their health or for other reasons. Lord, we ask that you would just bless our church and help us to be the best church we can be. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Okay, so we're on lesson 3 of Abram. This journey that he's on, that's in the future, he will be known as the father of faith. And I've told you that he's on this journey because he doesn't start out as a man of faith. And we're at this, not yet, well, during this class we'll be at this halfway point of this journey. Chapter 16, if you want to read along. He's starting there somewhere. And he's continually being disobedient. I've been trying to call that out. Unfaithful, but God is consistently being faithful to him. And we're at one of, I'm going to say, of the two major points in his life where you could see the man of faith coming out. And that's where finally God says something to him. And then God says in the word that Abram believed God. And it was credited to him as righteousness. We're right in the discussion here where this has happened. We finished that off last week, which is really cool. And you really think, wow, he's finally arrived. If we could stop right there, we have our man of faith, Abram. And but he sort of blows it a little bit with, but God, how do I know? How do I know? And that's where we are in this discussion. How do I really know? His belief was credited to him as righteousness, but he's not going to hang his hat on belief. He still wants to know, so he's asking God that. And God is going to answer him. God is faithful. In our unbelief, or our small amount of belief, he is still faithful. And I'm here to tell you, I'm going to introduce this because I don't want you to miss it. This is really important. There's nothing Abram's going to do right in the next 2 lessons. God is still faithful constantly. And if you don't get that and see that, because I don't want us just to go through all this life, and he's going to lie again, and he's going to move out of the promised land, and he's going to do things that we're going to learn today that are just pure sin. God is not faithful. God is still faithful. And he's finally going to have a victory, and we're not going to get to that again until lesson number 5. And he's going to have the faith. So in our journey, if you've come today and said, I want to build up my faith, I want to have the faith of tell you, don't lower the bar so low. Aspire to something better. Or at least understand, yeah, that's okay, but keep at it because God's on this journey with you. He wants to work with you wherever you're at. And don't think that when you've messed up, oh, God says, I'm done with you. So there's the lesson for the day. Let's just move on with the actual class. Okay, so we're at this point back in Genesis 15, and he said to him, I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to possess. But he said, oh God, how am I to know that I will possess it? So, that's where we left off. Verse 9, I guess we're in chapter 15. Sorry. And Chris is going to be my reader today.
He said to him, bring me a heifer 3 years old, a female goat 3 years old, a ram 3 years old, and a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. And he brought him all these, cut them in half, laid them each half over against the other. But he did not cut the birds in half. And when birds of prey came down to the carcasses, Abraham drove them away.
Okay. So this is the response that God has to this answer. How can I know? Why did God ask Abram to do this? What's going on here? What is this? This doesn't happen anywhere else in the scripture, at least that I know of. Of these taking all these animals, cutting them in half, and laying them on two sides of the path. What's going on?
Well, it says we will make an agreement.
Okay.
So in order to make an agreement, there has to be a sacrifice.
Okay. Sacrifice, a contract. There's an agreement or a contract. This would be a very understanding business contract, a legal contract that would be made at the time. We believe that this is something that happened often, and Abram may have already been in contracts like this with other people in the area that he's living. This would be the business contract. And the whole thought of this is we're going to split these animals apart. And what would happen next is the two people making a contract, purchasing a land or some other type of a major agreement, and they would walk through this, and in this contract, they would be saying, if I break this contract, let me be like these animals. You have the right to kill me. This isn't a godly contract. This isn't something that God gave us. This would be the social norm of the time. So the two making the contract would walk through the middle and have this as a legal binding. If somebody then broke the contract, the other person could kill them, and there would be no recourse because they deserved it. They broke the contract. Why would Abram have some anxiety about going into a contract with God like this?
I think it's making him feel like he's got an obligation.
Okay?
It's like a promissory.
That's what God would be wanting for Abram to have some skin in the game. Because up to this point, everything's been on, hey, Abram, hey, go this place or do this thing or believe in me, and there's just all these promises that you're going to get. Okay? Now there's an obligation for Abram. Why would Abram worry about this?
Up to this point, he's kind of had it. Well, yes, God, but if I get in a tough situation, I've got my
agreement, an equal agreement.
It's an equal agreement.
And up to this point, God is protecting him. He says, look back over 15, I will protect you, and your reward will be great.
Yeah.
So now it's
There's
not.
pretty much only a good things are going to happen. Okay? If you don't want to follow me, okay, the good things won't happen. But now there's going to be, if you don't follow me, there's actually going to be consequences.
That's what I was gonna say, it's a dreadful thing to fall in the hands of the living God.
Absolutely.
I'm sure that came across.
How many people even today think this is how our relationship with God is? Not anybody in this room, of course, but a lot of people. My relationship with God is based on if I mess up, boom, he's going to punish me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's real. We recognize that we're not sufficient, that we cannot live sin-free.
Mm-hmm.
We stumble, we make mistakes, we get angry, with all those things. And so, yeah, I think we always kind of live in this little bit of God, are you going to strike me down?
Right? And there's a difference between being punished by God and just having the consequences for our sin.
Oh,
And I want us to talk about that in a little bit because there's consequences for Abram's unfaithfulness.
the nature of the contract and the nature of the covenant here is sacrifice. It's sacrifice, a living sacrifice.
Yes.
And also in Eden, the nature of the consequence was a living sacrifice. The animal was killed to cover the sin. And of course, with Christ, let's go to the tabernacle, the living sacrifice. And, it's setting the precedent here, and continuing it up to the death and resurrection of Christ.
Absolutely. We're going to talk a little bit more about Jesus in just a little bit. Chris, can you read this?
As the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell on Abram, and behold, dreadful and great darkness fell upon him. Then the Lord said to Abram, know for certain that your offspring will be sojourners in a land that is not theirs, and will be servants there, and they will be afflicted for 400 years. But I will bring judgment on the nation that they serve, and afterward they shall come out with great possessions. As for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried in a good old age. And they shall come back here in the 4th generation, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete.
Wow. There's a lot here. Remember, Abram's just asking, how will I know what you say is going to come true? And God's just downloading a whole Wikipedia site. You want to know? Let me tell you what's going to happen here. Man, why did he give him so much information? None of it's like real practical. Anything that's going to happen pretty much in his lifetime, except for you're going to die here. Brian.
Well, it does give him this is how eventually your descendants will possess this land. And he gives them the advance so that they know. Anybody who's following afterwards will be like, okay, yeah, God said that this would happen. We'd end up in Egypt for a while. And he didn't say Egypt specifically, but
Yeah, but this is pretty much for his offspring more than even to Abram at this time. But man, if you want to know what's going to happen, let me tell you, mind blown.
This is the second time I see a prophecy.
Okay? Yeah.
The first prophecy I see is to Abraham. It's the stars of the skies and the dust and the sands of the earth. And it makes a division there. The stars of the sky, Israel, and the line of Christ. The dust of the earth, the rest of us, because we're all here.
Oh, interesting.
And
Okay.
okay, so there's a prophecy there. There's a prophecy too And the same, because he's telling him specifically what's going to happen in the future. I mean, this is, you know.
Some pretty hard facts
It's
too.
pretty hard facts.
It's not,
So, but he's telling him again and again, you know, but more specifically because the other was too abstract apparently. Now it's very specific. Yeah.
so what's the difference between a promise and a relationship based on promises and a relationship based on a contract or a covenant?
Both ends have to live up to the agreement.
Okay? And a promise, you don't have to actually be in an agreement, but a contract, you certainly can. A promise is, y'all, I'm going to get you a great birthday present this year, Brian. Nothing Brian needs to know about. There's nothing he needs to do. He just needs to sit back and get it. But now there's a contract, right? Okay, Brian, if you mow my lawn, I'll mow yours, right? There's an agreement here, and he's got some skin in the game. What's the difference between, I think I might ask this question later on, let's go. The difference between a contract and a covenant. So this is a business contract really setting, but for God, he's calling it a covenant. The difference being is a contract is a legal binding. If you do this, the law says this can happen. There's a punishment. A covenant is a spiritual agreement. Both of them are agreement. And that is, if I make a covenant with Kendall, there is something he needs to do, there needs to be something I do. But when you make a covenant relationship, you're going to be faithful to it because God is in there. It's a covenant, it's a three-way with God, and it says, okay, Kendall, you do this, I'm going to do this. But even if you don't do it, I'm still going to do it because this is my side of this relationship, this agreement that we're going to have. You know, you're going to have to deal with God if you don't do it. So when we talk about the covenant, and why I keep saying covenant all over again, it's because he wants, this is a spiritual thing that God is full in on. So the interesting phrase in here that I want to pull out is Abraham felt there was a, what does it say? A dreadful and great darkness. When he fell into sleep, he had this feeling of dreadful and great darkness. And I don't know, this may have just been the seriousness of an attention getting, maybe he's finally, God is getting his attention that you need to start taking your relationship more seriously with me and stop half doing what I'm asking you to do.
I was just thinking about the whole process. You know, hunters here, people that have dealt with getting meat from an animal would know, but that work that he put in to get all those animals and divide them all up and do all that, that's a lot of work. And then apparently it was going on long enough that the vultures noticed.
Yeah.
And so they wanted to come around and he had to shoot them off. And then as night comes, I'm not sure that he knows what's going to happen at this point. It's not like God has said, other than this, you know, when he's told him, you know, but he had still something coming. And so there may be this feeling of dread, and I don't know what's coming next,
Yeah.
that Abram is experiencing.
Why did I ask that question?
Yeah, yeah.
Why can't I keep my mouth shut?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, let's find out what's going to happen. Chris?
When the sun had gone down and it was dark, behold, a smoking fire pot and a flaming torch passed between these pieces. On that day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, to your offspring I give this land from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates, the land of the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Cadmonites, the Hittites, and the Perizzites, the Rephaim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites,
God, God himself, on both sides of this covenant, God is the one walking through the middle of it. And what this is saying to Abram, is, if I mess up as God, and I don't fulfill my side of this bargain, I will be like these animals that have died. And Abram, if you mess up, I will take the punishment. The dread, the consequences falls on me. How is this now more like our relationship with Jesus? Come on, you guys got this. Mark.
So ultimately, Jesus bears everything for us as far as our payment for sin and reconciliation with the Father. However, we're also required. I mean, Jesus says, "Take up your cross." So we're also required to do work and if necessary, go through pain. So it sounds like something similar to Abraham. Abram, he obviously didn't have to go through the work. He wasn't going to actually conquer all this land by himself, but he still had to put in work, and he still had to, sacrifice himself.
We have a covenant relationship with Jesus. Absolutely. Don't sin anymore. Take up your cross. Live like I did. We got a covenant. There it is. But the difference is we don't have that first part where, you mess up, boom, there's consequence. I won't say consequences. You've broken the contract. You're dead. And you are. When you sin, you're dead. You're dead to God. And Jesus says, tell you what, make a covenant with me. And I'm not going to fail you. I've never sinned. I've been completely obedient to the Father. So I'm good on my side. But I'll tell you what, in this covenant relationship, Keith, if you mess up, Jesus says, I got you. I'll pay the price. You're still good. Chris, I got you. I'll be the one to pay the sin. I'll pay the price. And a lot of times when we think of grace, we think, okay, God's ignoring the sin. And I think this is much better for us to understand what's going on. Grace is not that God's just ignoring it happening. Grace is Jesus saying, I'll pay the price. You don't have to pay the price for your sin. I got you covered. Chris.
I just something here, how we got the symbolism that God is taking the consequences for Abram's mistakes or sin.
The smoking pot and the burning torch, the light that came out.
But don't they just represent God passing through God?
God.
His end of the covenant? How do they
And upholding Abram's part of the covenant.
And
He went on both sides of the agreement.
he walked through the middle on both sides.
He walked on the middle and both sides. Where it should have been one of those and Abram walking through. God says, this is what.
So the implication is that, if two guys were using this method to make an agreement, that both of them would walk through together.
Yep.
In this case, Abram is not walking through at all.
Yep.
And you have also
Sorry.
the fire pot and the lamp.
Yep.
God and Christ. You've got Christ as the light. God's sovereignty is established through the fire, but Christ is there too. It's not that bad.
Okay.
Abram seeing this in a dream.
He's out.
Yeah.
He's out.
Yeah.
It's beyond a dream here. what's he seeing?
Did he wake up?
Well, he woke up, but, I mean, it doesn't say anything about a dream, it says.
Well, was it dark?
Sleep, terrifying darkness, and then he sees this prophecy, he sees what the next 4 years. That's beyond the dream. That's true. He sees something that's actual.
Yeah, I guess I meant to say he was asleep.
Yeah, but it's not it's actual though.
Yeah.
Well, God often has spoken to other people through dreams as well, so it can still be a dream.
And
it can
real.
still be actual, true.
Yeah. Okay. And I just thought it was interesting the Jebusites are being mentioned, because the Jebusites would be the ones that are living in Jerusalem anytime you talk about the Jerusalem. So there's the prophecy there that the Israelites will come in control of that city.
In verse 13, where God says, know for certain,
No, for certain. Yeah.
and I guess this is my take on it. God said, this is the way it's going to be. He didn't ask Abraham, is it okay with you?
Yeah.
So I guess sometimes it's easy to read things into it that are not there because we think on human terms. But God said, know for certain.
No, for certain.
There's no
And stop asking me how I will know. Just know.
There's no wiggle room here. God is saying, this is what it's going to be. This is it.
Excellent point. Okay, so that finishes up chapter 15, and we got about half an hour left. Let's see if we can get through chapter 16. Chris.
Now Sarai, Abraham's wife, had borne him no children. She had a female Egyptian servant whose name was Hagar. And Sarai said to Abram, behold, now the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Go into my servant. It may be that I shall obtain children by her. And Abram listened to the voice of Sarai. So after Abram had lived 10 years in land of Canaan, Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, the Egyptian, her servant, and gave her to Abram, her husband, as a wife. And he went into Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, she looked with contempt on her mistress. And Sarai said to Abram, may the wrong done to me be on you. I gave my servant to your embrace, and when she saw that she had conceived, she looked on me with contempt. May the Lord judge between you and me. But Abram said to Sarai, behold, your servant is in your power. Do to her as you please. Then Sarai dealt harshly with her, and she fled from her.
Okay, what do we know about Sarai? Not mentioned too much. What's your general feeling of Sarai? What do we know about her up to this point?
She'd been Abram's wife for many years.
Many years.
And still no children.
Yeah, still no children, even though she keeps hearing there's a promise of them, right?
He was very attractive.
Very beautiful woman. She, we're guessing, grew up in the Ur of the Chaldeans, which again would be a big city. She would be a city girl. Then they went to Haran, which is another moderate-sized city, but now she's a sojourner. I have a hard time saying that word. She's out in the desert. She's going to live in tents. She's never going to have a home or a place. We do know for the previous, 30 years, she's going to live in tents. That takes a lot of faith. It takes a lot of faith for her to follow her husband. She's probably very wealthy by this time compared to other people, so she is experiencing the blessings of Abram, but yet the one thing that she really, really wants isn't coming true. I think she's a woman of great faith, so I would hate for this one, this is the one event that if you take it in isolation, you really would wonder about Sarai. So she's been faithful up until this point. We all break, right? The Bible isn't going to conceal our warts. So why did she take matters into her own hands?
Because she wanted Abraham to have descendants.
Have his descendants, okay. Because there was a promise out there, and maybe she was the problem. Okay, I can see that, right?
Yeah, I think this is the kind of thing that we struggle with all the time, maybe on lesser levels than this, hopefully we're not handing our spouses off to servants, but the notion that, okay, we know that there's a promise, but it doesn't look like it's being fulfilled, and it looks like I am beyond the point of being a part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, she cannot see that there's any way that through her, the promise could be fulfilled. And so she thinks, okay, what's another option? Looks around, maybe people's around them do this kind of thing. And so she's thinking, oh, maybe this is the way God will fulfill the promise. So she might have gone into it with that kind of thinking, which is not, I mean, it's wrong, but it's not completely outside of the notion that God is involved.
Yeah.
It's the age-old problem. Am I to sit here and wait on God, or is God waiting on me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Excellent way of putting it. Yeah. So she's trying to do something. Why didn't Abram, who was just credited as righteousness because he believed God, yes, this would happen, why didn't he say no? Bob?
Because he was credited with righteousness didn't make him perfect.
Okay, that's exactly right.
Abraham, he's like the rest of us. And Sarah, her human wisdom has failed again. And that's why God said, and know for certain, because he knew what was coming.
Yeah, don't give up on me. And yet, don't wait. I really think that the time it's taken for her to have a baby is a direct consequences to Abram's unfaithfulness. I mean, this could have all turned around very quickly, right from back in Ur, hearing the first blessing, go where I'm going to tell you to go, and leave your family. And he could have been obedient and faithful right from the beginning. But again, that's like us. That's exactly what Bob is saying. We're human. We keep failing God. He is going to keep going. But yet there's the consequences that, based on that, it keeps getting delayed because God goes, I got to work with you more. I got to work with you, both Abram and Sarah. I got to work with you more because you are going to be my example of how I'm going to work in faith with others. Who does Abram remind you of? That woman over here, she's the one that offered her slave. Yeah. Certainly doesn't remind you of Noah that we just studied about earlier. Talk about this a little bit more. What do you think of Hagar's actions?
Jealousy is a natural thing that sometimes happens when emotions are brought in. There was possessiveness, being that she was the one that got pregnant and Sarah did not.
Yeah.
So she kind of felt like maybe she had one up on her. But
Yeah. I won the lottery here. She's been in their household since Egypt. She knows how blessed they are. She knows how God is with them. And she's, wow, look at I just got a huge upgrade. A big promotion here. And it's going to be through me, right? I think it is sort of natural. Paul, did you have something?
she was obedient to what Sarah wanted what to do.
She was obedient. We're going to find, I think she's one of the most faithful of the three, to be honest, as we continue with the story. And we are.
The angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, the spring on the way to Shur. And he said, Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? She said, I'm fleeing from my mistress Sarai. The angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress and submit to her. The angel of the Lord also said to her, I will surely multiply your offspring, so that they cannot be numbered for multitude. And the angel of the Lord said to her, behold, you are pregnant and shall bear a son. You shall call him Ishmael, because the Lord has listened to your affliction. He shall be a wild donkey of a man, his hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. And he shall dwell over against all his kinsmen.
Boy, was he-
Keep going.
So she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her. You are a God of seeing. For she said, truly have I seen him who looks after me. Therefore, the well was called
Yep.
that well. It lies between Kadesh and Bered. And Hagar bore Abram a son. And Abram called the name of his son, whom Hagar bore Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to Abram.
Okay. A lot going on there. Why did God talk to Hagar? God didn't talk to, well, he hadn't talked to Sarai through this whole, we don't have any evidence of that.
This is the first time we have an angel.
We have an angel talking, not God himself, is that it?
But,
Okay. We're going to run into a number of angels in the next couple of chapters. Yeah. Mark?
Almost like any offspring of Abraham was going to be special, even if this is not the one through whom the Messiah was going to come. But certainly, the angel has, says, your descendants are going to be great, and they're going to strive against, the brethren. That, apparently something, God wants to bless, Hagar's offspring.
Because he's being faithful to his side of the promise, right? God is still going to be faithful, even though Sarai and Abram just completely did the wrong thing. There was no even half faith in this. They were completely wrong. But God's saying exactly what we talked about the covenant. If you mess up, I'll take it on. Right? Does the same thing in our lives.
I was just thinking, it also demonstrates that God values people differently than we do. And he values Hagar and Ishmael. And so he's paying attention to her, giving her a chance to have faith as well. Abram and Sarai kind of ended up thinking, well, Hagar's just going to be collateral damage.
She's just a possession.
Yeah.
Right?
Just get rid of her. That was a mistake. Let's move on without her. But God's saying, no, you're important.
You're important. Yeah. And your son's going to be important.
You've got the difference between the stars of the skies and the grains of the sin. Hagar's children are the grains of sand.
But they're in the blessing. They
But the
fall
blessing,
within the
so
blessing.
they
They're
fall
falling
in the
within the promise. Yep, absolutely. Why did he ask her, where did you come from and where are you going? It's just an interesting. I always like the questions, things that God says. He doesn't mince words.
It reminded me when God asked Elijah,
Okay, yeah. Why
why are you here? Why did you come here? Whatever, even though he had sent me. And I think it's part of the God needs us to express what we're dealing with to him.
Yeah. You were just a slave. You were nobody. Now you are. Let me tell you where you're going. You this narrative now. You're part of the story. So we talk about this. God's still being faithful. He's going to bless his offspring. Whether it came from Sarai or not, that's where his desire, that's what he wanted and is still going to happen, because God is going to stay faithful, because that's the covenant that he made with Abram. But now there's more to it. God didn't mess this up. Abram and Sarai did, but he's going to still be faithful.
There's also a whisper of confession here. She's acknowledged herself. In other words, she's before God, and she's acknowledging why, her action.
Her actions.
So there's a confession.
She's
Significance.
extremely faithful here. She doesn't cower. What's the meaning of Ishmael's name? God hears me. God sees me.
That's amazing. I love
Did everything turn out? We're a little bit faster. Got another chapter to go. Did everything turn out the way Sarai thought it was going to?
I would say yes, but she thought that she was the problem, and she gave her servant to be a wife so that the promise could continue. And now the servant is going to have a son, so that just kind of cemented that she was the problem.
Okay.
Not that Abraham was, not that Hagar was. I mean, it's just, but not because God will say later, no, it's Abram and Sarah.
And if she really thought, okay, the promise is going to continue, but she she ran away, and it was like, well, good. I don't want her anywhere around this. But God sends Hagar back, and it's like, Sarah, you're going to have to be fully aware of what is going on. And Hagar have to have a lot of faith to go back, but she had talked to God, and she knows God's presence now in her life. And the promise is she's being very faithful for the promises of God.
Sarah's going to have to live with the results of her plan,
Yes.
even though they didn't exactly come out the way she thought.
Dale.
Well, in defense of Sarai, she's an 80-year-old some woman.
Yeah.
What was her physical condition really like? Had she went through menopause, or was that a thing then? You see what I'm saying? I mean, maybe she realized that.
That's when you don't want to be the teacher up front.
Well, yeah, I know. Sorry to do that to you, but to see
Okay.
her in this position, she might think, well, I'm not physically able to have a child.
She is beyond having children.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. So God's going to do this miracle thing.
Carol.
Hagar had to swallow her pride. That's where she fell short, because when she found out she was pregnant, she's like, ooh, what a minute.
Yep.
So pride had to be swallowed for her to go back to Sarah
Yep.
and be in subjection.
Absolutely. Yeah. Hagar's faith. I mean, she's the one that, at least on that side, from a Muslim perspective, what she did was incredible. So now we're in chapter 17. Let's see how far we can get through. There's a lot of reading. There's not a lot of action here. But the interesting part is what Abram and Sarai just got done doing. And now we are either 12 or 13 years later. Time has gone by. They've had to deal with it. Maybe I'm pretty sure Abram thinks the promise is already fulfilled. He's clueless on this. And yet we see here God's faithfulness. He's actually going, okay, you made it 13 years. I'm going to reward you for that. Chris.
When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to Abram and said to him, I am God Almighty. Walk before me and be blameless, that I may make my covenant between me and you, and may multiply you greatly.
reaffirming the covenant to him. And what is God asking him to be? Faithful, blameless, follow me. Please, please. He's, I know time goes by, but I'm going to finally bless you. And we all know the results of Abraham not following God. I'm just putting here is, again, I believe the delay of Isaac has been because Abraham has not been faithful. God is looking for that. And so we're finally now to the time where he is being more faithful. And the other thing to think in mind, God could have nullified this covenant because of Abraham, or in his promises, multiple times. So I just think it's really important that God, I know I've said it probably a dozen times, God is continuing to work with Abraham during this time to finally get him to this point. And again, he's still going to mess up. What God's plans and what he wants to accomplish through Abraham is not based on Abraham's faithfulness. It's based on God's faithfulness with him. Okay. Chris.
And God said to Abraham, as for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your offspring after you, throughout their generations. This is my covenant, which you shall keep between me and you and your offspring after you. Every man among you shall be circumcised.
Okay. So, God is adding to Abraham's responsibility. And now he's giving him this covenant. Part of the covenant relationship is circumcision. Why does God do that? Why now, after all this stuff? Why is he giving them circumcision? Yeah, nothing. You watch YouTube. Why circumcision? Bob.
And it is a remembrance that God
Okay.
is in control.
Okay.
I am Lord.
Something physically obvious that you are committed to me. What's it? And very personal, very intimate. Okay?
It's separated him from pagans or
Yeah.
everybody else.
Yep. You obviously knew where you stood in this covenant relationship compared to everyone else. Okay, it's taking off of the flesh in the fleshy world and being faithful to God and living in a different way. Okay? One more reading, a couple more questions, and we'll finish up today.
And God said to Abraham, as for Sarai, your wife, you shall not call her Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. I will bless her, and moreover I will give you a son by her. I will bless her, and she shall become nations. Kings of peoples shall come from her. Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed, and said to himself, shall a child be born to a man who's 100 years old? Shall Sarah, who's 90 years old, bear a child? And Abraham said to God, oh, that Ishmael might live before you. God said, no, but Sarah your wife shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his offspring after him. As for Ishmael, I have heard you. Behold, I have blessed him, and will make him fruitful, and multiply him greatly. He shall father 12 princes, and I will make him into a great nation. But I will establish my covenant with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear to you at this time next year.
Finally, at 100 years old. Now, you notice how Sarah is included with the promises. This This is great. God is rewarding her. Yeah, she made a mistake. They lived through it. The consequences are over for that. She's finally going to be blessed. And to include her in everything that God is doing with Abraham, she is now Sarah.
My Bible says that Sarah and Sarah both made princes. One is just an dialect and one is a Canaan dialect.
Okay.
That's interesting.
Why does Abraham laugh? What? Yeah. Just for the absurdity of what is going to happen. Yet, it certainly doesn't show his faith that he would laugh. Yeah. But I want to bring this up because Sarah is acknowledged in Hebrews chapter 11. She was a woman of faith. I think she was a woman of faith before her bad event, but God still counted her righteous on the faith that she had then, before and after. By faith, Sarah herself received power to conceive even when she was past the age, so she considered him faithful who had promised. I believe she believed God also like Abraham, and it was credited to her as righteous. And she was blessed because of it. Thank you. That was a lot of material. There's a lot to get through with Abraham. We got 2 more full lessons to get through. Thank you.